Hey everyone, Duke here, and today I got a big one for you. Today I would like to show you the latest development in storage technology, my brand new double speed into item sorter / shulker loader. This unit functions very similarly to Pal's double speed shulker loader, while coming in at a smaller footprint at 11 blocks deep, 9 blocks high, versus Pal's at 11 blocks deep and 12 blocks high, and using less hoppers per slice, coming in at 9 hoppers per slice versus Pal's at 12. And in addition, we have support for a sorter slice design that isolates the redstone signals between each slice. That way you can have a much easier time sorting stackable to 16 items, and stackable to 64 items can be sent in larger batches since you don't need as many items in the sorting slot. If you'd rather not go for this sorter slice design, then you'll be happy to know that this shulker loader is compatible with the traditional design. As stated earlier, this unit functions similarly to Pal's shulker loader, except instead of having the clock system for feeding the items into the shulker box in the front, we now have it moved over to the back. And likewise, instead of having shulker boxes dispensed from the side, we now have them dispensed from the top. The elegant thing about this clock system is, of course, whenever items come in, the torch will depower, which will activate the clock. This observer will notice that, and will directly power this dropper, and in turn, power this dropper. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Well, if it directly powers this dropper, then it also means it's going to power the droppers of either side of either slice. This may seem like a bad thing, but it's actually a good thing, which I'll get into later. Now I know some of you will have the question, what if these clocks run out of sync? Can't they interfere with each other? Well, actually, no. If I go ahead and just say, let's do a tick freeze here, break this torch, we're going to do a tick step, then we're going to break this torch so that way both of these clocks are one tick off, and let's go ahead and put in some items here, and then go ahead and do tick freeze to run them again, and as you can see, the items get through just fine. And actually a better test would be to put the items in the top dropper, like so. So you can see that, yeah, it does continue to work there. Nothing gets backed up. Everything's working great. And I have done this test with doing tick step 1, tick step 2, tick step 3, and tick step 4, which at which point the clocks just run in complete synchronization again, and they always run at double hopper speed. There are no issues where the clock systems interfere with each other. I'd like to highlight the shulker box replacement system. As you can see, functionally, it is very similar to the one in Pal's sorter, although a little bit more compact. Right here, we got a shulker box that's almost filled. And I'd like to take this moment to highlight something. And that is, as you can see here, and if movable tile entities are turned on in CarpetMod. This sorted system does not require movable tile entities to function, however, it is fully compatible with them and will not break until when movable tile entities are enabled. So let's go ahead and put that in, and we can see it work right now. If you were to try this with Pal's sorter with movable tile entities enabled, well, let's just say things would not work out too well for you. As you can see, his system unfortunately breaks with movable tile entities enabled. The importance of having a unit that's compatible with both 1.14 vanilla and CarpetMod's movable tile entities may not at first seem apparent. Although, if you've been following along with the 1.15 snapshots as I have, you would have noticed that Mojang is definitely making quite a push to bring Java Edition to feature parity with Bedrock Edition. And you know what Bedrock Edition has? Movable tile entities. I believe that it is entirely possible, and as soon as 1.15, we could have movable tile entities in the Java edition of the game, and therefore, building a system that's compatible with them and doesn't break with movable tile entities will be quite important. And of course, the day that movable tile entities get added to the game, Pal's shulker loader will unfortunately be no more. And if you're building a storage system today, you're probably going to want to do your best to make sure it's going to be compatible with future versions. So keeping movable tile entities in mind for anyone who's building a storage system today, I think is very important. Now something you likely notice as soon as the opening cinematic is that whenever Visvine replaces a shulker box, there is a high probability that a single item will be dispensed and left to glitch out, despawn, and will be lost. I don't really consider this to be that big of an issue, considering you're not using this kind of system to source, say, diamonds or whatever. And in addition, whenever a shulker box is replaced, this bottom dropper will tend to get, 2 or 3 items stuck in it. And this could be a problem over time, having those items back up, except, if you remember from earlier, and the clock systems kind of bleed over. So, if I were to simulate, like, say, an adjacent slice being sorted, you can see that this dropper gets cleared. So, this doesn't really become an issue. And speaking of items getting stuck in the dropper, another location where some items can get stuck, or specifically just one, is the top dropper. I have found in my testing that it's not uncommon for the top dropper to have a single item stuck in it. To me, this isn't really much of a problem. I'd like to take a moment just to fly around the unit so you can get a good look at it if you're wanting to replicate it in your test world. Of course, there will be a world download down in the description down below, so if you just want to download the world and mess around with it right away, you can go ahead and do that. Just for reference, this is the direction these observers down here face. And yeah, these cauldrons have water in them. In my particular case, I think I only put 1 level of water, but it doesn't matter how much water you put in them. You can put 1 level, you can fill them up, it doesn't really matter. Taking a quick stop over to my test world. This is the place where I've been designing and building a full storage system that will eventually be built to my single player world. And I'm happy to report that my new shulker box and double speed shulker box loader has been performing very, very well. So far I have ran over 50,000 items through this thing, and if we just do some spot checking, you can see items aren't really backing up over time, which is not something I could say for the Pow sorter when I was testing it in here. Over time, it would definitely have an issue with in the dropper and of getting backed up and of over time. And something I would like to add is I have not only been testing with Pow sorter and my own, but also other designs out there. So GPWs I've tested with, and Samos Visages and a double speed shulker loader I've also tested with. And through all my testing so far, I have found Pow and my new design right here to be the most reliable out of all my testing thus far. Speaking of reliability, dropping shaders and hitting F3 plus G, I wanted to highlight something important. If you're going to build this system, or really any item sorter, or this really goes for any sort of critical redstone, make sure your redstone does not cross chunk borders, because there is no guarantee that you go someplace in your world and part of your sorting system is loaded and the other part isn't, and it sends redstone signals outside into an unloaded chunk, and because it's an unloaded chunk, the redstone doesn't get processed and therefore possibly breaking your sorter. So when building, make sure your sorter logic is all contained and within a single chunk. That way there isn't any sort of issues. Taking a detour to my single player world. If you've seen the last episode of World Update, then you know that I had built a massive ice farm, and when it comes down to packing all of that ice into shulker boxes, I had originally built Pow's shulker box loader. After using Pow's double speed shulker box loader to pack up nearly 5 million ice, I have torn it down and replaced it with my own unit. And so far, I have collected about 350,000 ice and packed it up into shulker boxes, and it's been handling it very well. We can see the first dropper here isn't really getting any item backup, which to contrast the Pow one, it was getting backup in the dropper and the hoppers facing into it. It was not really handling this situation all that well. And something else I'm doing here is I need to go ahead and put those shulker boxes in a storage, and the storage happens to be higher up than the the output for my system. So what I just do is I just have them sit here in the dropper at the bottom, rather than like hook this up to a hopper system, dispense them. Basically, like whenever the shulker box gets replaced, this dropper will trigger. This does mean I have a single shulker box stuck in this dropper at any given time, stuck in these droppers at any given time. But for this use case, it isn't really that much of a problem. So if, say, you happen to have like a witch farm, and you're packing stuff up into boxes and then sending all those boxes off to some sort of storage or whatever, then yeah, you if you're okay with having a single box stuck in the dropper there, you don't even need any additional hoppers and redstone in order to dispense it into a water stream and send it off. So there's something to consider. One last thing I'd like to highlight is in the will download my use of slime blocks here rather than ice. The reason for that is because items, if I demonstrate right here, actually need to flow across slime blocks faster than they would on solid blocks, but slower than ice. And I do this to avoid the need of a perfect item aligner. If I used ice, I would need to use a perfect item aligner. And also be okay with the only 99.9% reliability of a perfect item aligner. If you don't use a perfect item aligner and just use a bunch of ice, of course, as with any double speed item sorter, the items are bound to end up missing the hoppers and skipping over them, and you'll have stuff that doesn't get sorted as a result. Well, there you have it, guys. A 1Y tillable, double-speed shulker box loader for Minecraft 1.14, and presumably future versions as well. Tune in tomorrow, where I talk about this monstrosity behind me. See you guys then.